Welcome everyone from the ENOL Association for the Studies of Giftedness. Welcome to this activity that we're organizing within the frame of the second set of international conferences on giftedness. COVID-19. This year, with the topic Consequences of the Non-Identification or the Merely Identifying as a Label. It's my honor to introduce you to Raquel Pardo de Santayana Sanz, PhD in Educational Sciences, specialized in high capacities and double exceptionality. She collaborates in JERIC in Sydney. She also collaborates in the URJC with the Versi team, with the research group of high performance and based in the educational social responsibility. She's a member of the scientific committee for the CIVIT, facilitator of emotional management for families in the Melbourne University, tuning into kids. She studied as a researcher. She's together with Caroline Denchu in Alberta University in Canada and with Linda Silverman in the center in Denver, in Colorado, in the United States, and with her working team. She also worked with a team of Linda in the Dabrowski decomposition. With her presentation, Emotions and the Complex Capacity, we understand how understanding is important to be able to progress. She will talk to us today. It's a great pleasure having her today once again, because she always shares lots of knowledge with us, and she shares with us all her positive energy, her help. And we're really happy to have you here, Raquel. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, and I hope you like it. Welcome to this talk on emotions and complex capacity, and understanding it and understanding ourselves to be able to progress. We need to think first, what are emotions? Emotions are just a set of automatic reactions that we have when faced to certain stimulus in the environment. It can generate fear, opportunity that we want to grasp. And that word, feeling that the emotion is generating, is what we can work on. So emotions are reactions that are more or less similar in all species, but in each of us is going to generate a different type of feelings. Reactions. Some are aware, and those are the ones that are going to allow us to realize what we're feeling, and then they will help us modify it or work on it. So, emotional management is working on our feelings. How do we work on our feelings? Well, there's 4 basic pillars. First one being belonging. We cannot approach emotional management forgetting that we're part of a society, getting away from our reality as social beings. We belong to a society, we live in an environment, and that reality is going to set our day-to-day. So if we try to avoid it, emotional management will never be complete. Then, second pillar would be to realize in general terms what would be our reference group, where do we belong, which are our defining features as humans inside our society. Then the third pillar would be to go deeper, to listen to ourselves, not only knowing which ones are our features that define us, but what is our particular individual profile. And then understanding us would be related to projection. We cannot only do emotional management on how to manage it, but we do it with a purpose. To be happier, to feel more satisfied with our reactions, with our feelings, with what we live every day. If we don't have some clear objectives, if there isn't a why behind it, we won't manage to give a sense to that emotional management. So we need this image in our mind with we've got these four basic pillars: connection, awareness, self-knowledge, and projection. But what we're talking about in these sessions is what is different in the complex capacity. Complex capacity for me, it's a different way of understanding what is the other capacities or giftedness, or if we call it complex capacity, it's because of this. Well, because I understand that we need to approach complex capacity in a holistic way, of that, a comprehensive way of all those high capacities, those giftedness. From science and from research, we need to split this complex capacity into smaller pieces so we can understand every peculiarity. We will work creativity, we will work on intellectuality, we will work on physical development, but psychomotor development. But when approaching it, especially when dealing with emotional management, we cannot separate realities of the complex capacity. And I said it in singular, but it's a way of saying that it's unique, it's one only. And that way of connecting into it, it's peculiar, it's particular, and it's impossible to split it. So when we're talking about one person, we're talking about one complex capacity. Complex because it's full of interconnected intensities, experiences, conflicts, feelings, emotion, livings. That's what makes it peculiar. The way that every person experiences and reacts to the reality. It's a complex reality. We're aiming at offering a term that respects individuality, but that it reminds us that within this individuality there is a common factor, a common element that is how complex their inner livings and inner feelings are, but always from that unique essence point of view. When a few months ago I thought about this complex capacity concept when I was working with other colleagues to post them on Facebook, I think that complex capacity came very often because of the work I've been done in time during the Dabrowski theory, in which I'm working very much lately. Positive disintegration theory of Dabrowski would understand this complex capacity as an interaction of the person with the environment to which it affects and that affects them, and this person would have these interconnected intensities that we mentioned before, and these would define the person in a global way over intellectual, over excitability, imaginative, sensitive, emotional, and psychomotor too. What sober excitability from Tversky is that it was a way of measuring these intensities, but we have to be aware that it doesn't necessarily have to have always a positive perception. They will be perceived and shown in different ways, and we have to be aware that we can see them in a positive way or we can see it in a negative way. And both perceptions are going to give us an important clues on what we should focus. This definition of the complex capacity will be shot or will explode thanks to what Dravosky mentioned, the autonomous factor. It's an internal strength, an internal push that makes us want to improve, to develop as people, that generates internal conflict, but it doesn't generate these conflicts per se. There is an intention for that. There's an aim for progress. Dabrowski mentioned different levels in the development, and we're trying to find the reintegration of the person, the ideal of the personality, our essence, respecting who we are, but also respecting that we belong to a society. And respecting this definition too, we can already sense that the consequences on this pillar drawing for the emotional management there will have a larger complexity. If we're talking about a large complexity, we will have to start focusing these four pillars in this complex capacity essence. That person where we're going to, with whom we're going to work has this peculiarity, and along the four pillars, we're going to have to be very aware of these capacities, and we're going to have to work on this capacity as a vital part of their essence. We're going to see every one of these pillars independently. So let's start with connection. Connection is the reality, the social reality of the person. We said when we were approaching for the first time in this talk the four pillars, that connection is that feeling of belonging. We are social individuals, that we are unavoidably part of our environment, and that's a part of our life that cannot be separated from our day-to-day life and our day-to-day reality. We have to be therefore aware of that side, and we have to develop it to be happy so our emotional management is full. If we're trying to avoid social side, we are avoiding a great part of our personal development. It would be crazy actually to consider it without this side. But within this connection, there are different elements that I would like to deal with. First is social acceptance of this complex reality, or complex capacity. And we have a problem with terms, with words. The wording we've used in the last years, me too, from the beginning, giftedness, high capacity, talent, extraordinary talent, high potential. But the problem with all this all these words, it gives an idea that is not realistic what is a complex capacity. When a person finds diversity in the classroom and we tell them that one of their students could have high capacity, we're not really telling them the reality of that student. We're not letting them visualize how complex the situation could be for that student. It's very important that we're very careful with wording. Those who are in this complex capacity, in the world of the complex capacity, don't find it so relevant because we know what we're talking about. We know what it involves. It's not just a high intellectual capacity. We know there's much more to it. But if we keep using these words for the people who are newcomers to this amazing world, people who want to learn about complex capacity, we're giving them from the beginning a wrong idea. And from this prejudice, we're going to build a problem that is not necessary. If we give the right name to things, if we name things properly, the newcomer will have the right idea of what they will be facing. I will say complex capacity. Okay, so capacity is telling me that there is a potential, but complex is telling me that it won't be easy. There is something else that is going to require my help, that is going to require support and help. And that's actually what we're looking for, what we need to be aware that complex capacity in this world of diversity also needs answers. If we want to write diversity in big letters, we also need to understand complex capacity from its whole reality. And of course, we have to work school adaptations. That's what I do at work. And when we're talking about adapting curricular activities, we have to go back to that concept. If we're talking about high intellectual capacities, we're going to believe that the measures within the schools are going to have to be adapted to that intellectual potential so that they can develop intellectually to their highest degree. But really, when we're talking about complex capacity, what we're telling them that there's many other elements that we can work is that we need to approach that reality from other perspectives that are not only going to favor the person with complex capacity, but that in the classroom we're going to be working many other things in a very interesting way. For example, when we're talking about emotional management, if we have an emotional management programming in the classroom, all the students in the classroom are going to benefit from it. When we're talking about the duality or the line between the overexcitability, psychomotor hyperactivity, and about the HDD, we can see that there's a very fine line. When can we talk about one thing and the other? And it's important to know this line because we have to be aware of the complex capacity and the overexcitability in the psychomotor areas. And we will see there in a more positive way or in a more constructive way rather than just seeing the fact that it just moves, keeps moving, there's no way they can stop. Well, there's an excess of energy, and sometimes the early stages of development is an energy that is very difficult to control, and complex capacity is a lot of energy for a kid to be able to develop self-control capacities to sit for hours and hours in the classroom. That's also something we have to take into account when we talk about curricular adaptation. And of course, if we're talking about connection, if we want complex capacity to connect and to be a feeling of belonging 100%, we need to remember that we need to remove those stigmas in society. How often have we read results of research studies that there was much less identification from people who came from less favored populations or ethnic minorities or, of course, with gender? Very often there's a hiding because there's an aware hiding of the potential because there hasn't been a rich enough environment for those kids to experience and develop their whole potential. But sometimes we see this hiding to be aware because the person wants to be part of society and believes that hiding their complexity and their capacities is going to be accepted much better and much easier. We need this not to be like this. We shouldn't stigmatize complex capacity. It's a group of people who live things in a different way, more intensely, with a set of internal processes, with conflicts that need to be listened to and managed. It's not all easy. It's not just high intellectual capacity. And of course, please don't believe that it's just high performance because there's much more to it. And we're going to see higher performance that is not complex capacity. And sometimes complex capacity is going to show without high performance. And of course, connecting requires common spaces. Those common spaces that nowadays are promoted mainly by associations and centers that assist people with complex capacity out of the school hours. Thanks to this, they find a space where they can talk, they can share freely, and they can be understood, and they can understand each other so much better. And these common spaces it's good that are created in more and more places, and even from the school. When talking about diversity, we invite to create these spaces with mentoring or with interleveled groups, with things that could be interesting for the kids, where they can work and develop further. We would then go to awareness. When we're talking about self-awareness, is the person knows the characteristics, the features that determine their personality. It's not that you tick all the 53 characteristics that you see on a list. No, is that you can understand. Do you look for your own answer? What can happen to you? Where are you? Where can you place yourself? And all this information can actually help you understand that there's a reason for everything that's happening to us. There is a why, there's a reason, and very often it is or it can be in a positive. Understanding this reality requires for all of us to understand that the person should be able to approach other realities, the literature around it, training in emotional management. When we're talking about awareness, self-awareness, not knowing each oneself, it's not so much knowing oneself, but having the resources to be able to name things, to know what is happening, what from an external point of view, from a more objective point of view. So the fact that I can understand my definitional features of complex capacity is going to help me understand and place myself. Am I in that group? Am I not? The fact that I can understand the terminology in emotional management, that if I understand and I know the names for feelings, if I have different resources on the emotional management processes, all this is going to help me understand so much better what is emotional management and what is going to help me to progress in my well-being, in my personal well-being. And in this self-awareness, there is a very important role of the environment to know and to make others aware. Those of us who are working directly with complex capacity, we need to spread the word. We need to explain what it is, what's the reality, what it involves. But we also need people to understand that is not easy and that is not something that wouldn't require specific management or a different treatment. Some of the problems connected to this complex capacity is that in the educational centers, if they do not connect complex capacity to a bad performance, and if there's a high performance, there's not a big problem to that, because if your performance is good, it's what it should be. But it's not analyzed. Other problems that arise, emotional problems, for example. So it's very important that in this awareness rising, we can see that the responses don't necessarily have to come in slots, in small portions. I need to be able to see that person from all the areas, from all their intensities. Those intensities, overexcitability, are ways of living, ways of experimenting, ways of feeling that make the person be more intense, but also more complex. They're more complex because they generate a set of internal circumstances and certain internal experiences that are difficult to accept. They somehow feel overwhelmed. The complex capacity person has a processing that is so big, a processing of the environment, of external reality, that they're just overwhelmed. It's like that collapse of the perception that we see in some disorders. But I think there's the hyper awareness, this processing of everything, this overload, that capacity of being in many things, that at the end, what they do is just overload that person and not allow them focus on what it should be, what's happening to them. Mindfulness in complex capacity is often talked about, and I would say that it is a very important thing to be working on mindfulness for these people. Understanding, even if it's just a few things, a few ideas of what mindfulness is, but the person should be able to understand or to be aware what that focusing is. And so that intensity these intensities don't swallow their energy and they don't turn into a terrible suffering. This emotional management, working with intensities, awareness of the intensities, management of these intensities are also going to be important to avoid that overwhelming feeling. Third pillar, well, we've talked about belonging and self-awareness, and this would be self-knowledge, knowledge of what I know. All that I've already seen objectively, all those things that I already know, which are defining features, what is emotional management. When I have all this picture in front of me, now let's see how it looks in my own reality. And I'm going to try to create my own profile. It's good and it's necessary when trying to identify, to compile information, and that's something we do, information from all areas, school, family, person, the tests that they're going through. But as well as that, the person itself needs to know themselves and they need to have access to this profile. They need to have access to that analysis of themselves that will help them understand themselves, that will help them see what moves them inside, what worries them, and what makes them progress. In this search, what moves me, what focuses me, I need to know what fills me in particular. Because complex capacity sometimes is very much connected to that willingness to learn, to access very intense energy, that everything wants to be done. That is important. Mindfulness, focus, to focus your energies, to set things aside. Maybe they're not so important, not so beneficial. What do I want? And it's important to be able to progress towards objective, a clear objective, specific. And how am I going to get there? When we're talking about emotional management 1 year ago, when in the last year I was talking about this, I was telling you about the philosophy tuning into kids developed from the University of Melbourne. The way this methodology is a family methodology because it's focused for people, for families. It's a way of managing life, the person's experiences, and trying to rethink over them and trying to help to rethink them from their own perspective without trying to give advice, without trying to give steps and recommendations, just making the right questions for the person to rethink, to focus, to be aware what's happened, what feelings the situation has generated, what could this person do to feel different in the next moment, how to act. It's their own tool building. They're building their own toolkit. This will just depend. How can I reach this? How can I achieve it? These tools can be thousands and they will all depend on my own profile, that individual profile. And I know they will be useful for me. Because if I'm giving you the tips, look, next time you should do this, this, and that, this would be the best, this would be what you should be doing. They're not going to be my tools. I'm not going to be able, because maybe I don't have the necessary elements to reach that point. Only when a tool has been created by me and it's been promoted from my point of view, from my way of being, that's its origin. That's when I can really grasp it and do it. If someone's giving me an advice of a reaction that I can't have, I cannot do it if there isn't a previous process where I've been thinking and I've been feeling. And projection as the last pillar of that emotional management would be to project where we're heading. Emotional management, it's a path. It can be satisfactory or painful during the process, but the final objective is to feel better, to love ourselves, to see where we want to go, to be aware that we can face these different situations in our life in a healthier, more positive way. And in this development, this projection helps us know and to focus which are our weak points, for example, the things that specifically I would like to work on. That's why, and when we talk about complex capacity, it's very important to have clear objectives. We know, we've already mentioned that in complex capacity, we tend to have lots of objectives and want to achieve many, many things. But we need to close objectives. We need to leave some aside and to focus on those that are healthy, that are appropriate, and that are aligned with myself, with my way of being. We join forces. It's difficult when we're living with complex capacity people. It's difficult to accept what they want to do as a whole. We tend to give them some advice. Oh, come on, with that capacity that you have, you should be doing this, or it would be great if you did this other thing. But really, what they need is respect. We need to respect what their inner self wants. Some people might have lots of things that they want to do, but some others just want to focus in that emotional development and they don't have intellectual objectives, for example. But it's also valid. Everyone has something that will move them, and that's what we will be focusing our efforts. And that's why that will help the person feel less tension, will reduce impulses, being aligned with them, being focused, that also will reduce impulses, having clear ideas. I think all these will help them. We have to have this slide into account because it's one of the most necessary moments where we have to work with emotional management in complex capacities. We need to remove the burden from these people. People with complex capacity, they not only feel the intensity and the energy of wanting to give, to learn, to do, but they also feel a huge responsibility towards others. They have to do it for others. They they have a commitment because they should, because they must, because their ideal that they want to reach. All the things that limit and that they relieve the person is going to help that person. They're going to manage their emotions so much better. They will not have less conflicts, but they will define them much better, and work will be done more concisely, more precisely with them. In this whole process, others play a very relevant role. I said it in my previous talk. There's a huge responsibility from the rest of us. Being parents is probably the hardest job on earth. But when we have these difficult situations at home, we cannot let intuition guide us. We need to prepare ourselves. We need to research. We need to train ourselves for the sake of the family, for the sake of those members, of the members of our family. We need to tag things, we need to name things, we need to understand, we need to collaborate in a constructive way, we need to build together, we have to be aware, and we have to be prepared for the person to be able to grow and to find their answers. Of course, educational centers, friends, associations, of course, those they also have a responsibility, explicit responsibility that has to be worked on, not only from the curricular point of view, not only from the intellectual point of view, not only from the tick of all those things that we have to do, but from the complexity of the reality that we're working on. There are many more perspectives to work on than just intellectual side. And how can we work? How can they work? Well, in the all four pillars, something can be done, and mainly in two ways. We can take an approach of awareness and self knowledge, self awareness. Of course, we have to train ourselves. We need to take courses. We have to read, do some research. I worry. And we will also have to take part in this self-awareness, giving them information. Sometimes from the outside, we don't see ourselves as a whole. And this information that we see from outside is going to give us some clues on how we are. How many times has it happened to you? Well, you normally do this very often, or you are this or you are that. And then you stop and think and say, yeah, maybe this is the image I'm projecting, and maybe that information is very valid to see how you really are. Please, let's keep on telling them, sharing this information with them, because that's going to enrichen their profile. I'm listening to myself and I'm receiving very useful information to learn more about myself. And this, knowing how we are, we're going to accept too, we're going to respect their processes. I think it's very important that, well, to follow a tip. It has helped me very much as a mother, but I also share it. Think about the future. When you need to make decisions, when you want to value, how far do I have to be strict with a decision instead of thinking about current reality, that's a moment reality. I think about the future, about the project, what I want for my kid in the future. Maybe the dimension of that now and taking it to the future, it could help me take better decisions. It might help me respect better that my kid is different, is peculiar, is different. If I know how my kid is, I can help them shape elements that could help them with their happiness. But we need to accept their peculiarities to help them manage those impulses better and to have a better emotional management. And to connect it with connection and projection, when we talk from the external help, it is important to promote that attitude of acceptance, that attitude of it's a reality that can fit if we all try, but we also have to think that we have to have a positive approach. I know there are many experiences in our lives that we've lived different experiences, and maybe some schools do not help appropriately, or social situations that have made us suffer. But it's important to have this positive perspective, that trust that things can be better, can get better, can be done. Because only when I take this approach this connection in a positive and constructive way, is we're going to receive the same from the other side. So we have to understand that people find it difficult to understand and to accept that complex capacity can be so complex, that can come with low performance, that can come with very negative overexcitabilities. Well, that's difficult to understand sometimes when someone is not living it from so close. We have to know that it's a complex reality. We have to understand that it's so much better to approach it with a positive perspective. Emotional management, if we want to work with it, has to be explicit. It requires personalization, clear objectives, and constant work. Personalization, we cannot give the same tools to all. Everyone should build their own, rethinking, reflecting, listening to themselves, analyzing, and us, what we have to be the corkscrew, to pull slowly what they feel, what they think, what has happened. How could you do it next time? But I'm only asking, I'm only inviting. I'm not giving advice. I'm just helping them think. I try to get out of that person what they should have and realizing what their strategies are to change things. Their clear objectives. Well, we need to focus. We need to know what within my emotional management I need. What are my weak points? What do I need to strengthen to be able to be happy? To be healthily social, I have to accept that I'm a social being, but I'm also an individual being. And the constant work. When I said that the Melbourne University courses are philosophy, it's because, of course, there's an initial training course, but it's day to day. We have to implement it on a daily basis. Every day there should be a moment in which we can talk, we can think about the day, especially when there's been especially difficult experiences that we spent longer time there and there are some more intense feelings that have to come out. But it's something that we have to have present on a regular basis. We don't talk about emotional management only when there's a big problem and then we have a family assembly. No, we do it on a daily basis. That's the moment when people, whatever their age, can create that knowledge, can create that own profile, understand themselves, create their tools little by little, and sometimes enrichen themselves, often see the process, how the process is changing, and learning from it. And that's all for me today. Then just yeah, my last advice is to feel for everything, to help, to feel, be more intuitive, to identify, and to be. Thank you for this time together, and I hope to see you very soon. Thank you.